Hey guys, it's Allie. Welcome back to Infertile AF, the podcast. This is episode 93 called Ruth. On today's episode, I'm proud to partner with Circle Surrogacy. Surrogacy and egg donation can feel like an overwhelming process at first, but having an experienced agency to partner with you and guide you through the process can make a world of difference. Circle Surrogacy and Egg Donation has been making parenthood possible for 25 years, bringing more than 2,200 babies into the world. And what sets Circle apart from other surrogacy agencies is that almost half of the staff have personal experience as a surrogate, a parent through surrogacy, or as an egg donor, or they've grown their families through IVF or adoption. They are passionate about helping others achieve their dreams of having a baby because they've been there themselves. Circle provides exceptional knowledge and experience, fixed costs and financing, and the highest success rate in the business. Learn more at circlesurrogacy.com and follow them on social media at Circle Surrogacy. Thanks, Circle. Okay, guys, so I am so excited to share this conversation with you today. This woman, her name is Ruth Corden, and she is absolutely fucking incredible. She is a podcast host herself of a show called Finding the Funny. She is an infertility advocate. She is just a wonderful woman. And today we're going to talk about her journey. She's living childless not by choice. So we're going to talk about how she got there over the last 8+ years. And we're covering everything from PCOS to miscarriage to mental health to feeling desperately sad to her siblings who have kids, including her brother, who you may know as talk show host James Corden. And we're going to talk about all these things. She's so interesting. She's obviously very funny. She is talking about the language that surrounds being childless not by choice, which I think is a really important thing to talk about. She's saying that she didn't give up on being a mom. She had to let it go. So I'm so grateful that she was super open with me, and I can't wait for you guys to hear this. So thank you to Ruth. Thank you all for listening. And without further ado, this is Ruth's infertility story. Ruth, hi. It's so good to talk to you. Thank you for taking the time.
It's lovely to talk to you. Thank you.
Yes, I have to say I sought you out because I saw an article and the headline really struck me, and it said, Ruth Corden on infertility. A doctor told me I was too old and fat to get pregnant. And just reading that broke my heart. And I was so intrigued with your story. So I reached out to you and you got right back to me. Thank you so much. I want to hear everything. But before we get started, I also want to talk about, you have a podcast too.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
So my sister and I, in amongst this like crazy journey, I've been sort of thinking about, what's my legacy and, what's not necessarily my plan B, but what's my life. And during lockdown, my sister and I started talking, the first lockdown we had in the UK, which was back at the beginning of the year in March. Mm-hmm. My sister and I started FaceTiming multiple times a day, and we really found that we brought quite a lot of joy in that really difficult time. And we just decided, hey, look, why don't we hit record on one of these chats? Mm-hmm. And so we did. We're just really excited. And, who knows where it'll go? You never know with this stuff, do you? But yeah, it's called Finding the Funny. And it's just my sister and I. It doesn't matter if you're American, you'll still get it as well. We just talk about all the things that we find funny about everyday life. So it's very observational. We have a few segments. We do a thing called The Big Questions, which can be anything from what shall I get my husband for his 40th birthday, right the way through to is a hot dog a sandwich?
Yes.
Kind of like
all right. Is it
level stuff?
Let's settle that right here and now. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
I don't know. I feel like that's too complex a question. I mean, technically, I suppose it is. It's a filling between two bits of bread.
I'm going to give you an emphatic no. It's not a sandwich.
Okay.
I don't think so. That's my opinion.
So we just talk about things that are very silly. It's half an hour. It's out every week. It's only about 35 minutes long, and we just want to bring some joy. We do have some serious chats as well. We end every episode with a bit more of a serious conversation. We cover everything from, like, we've talked about infertility, we've talked about baby loss, we've talked about loneliness and mental health, and so we just try and cover a whole load of topics, but it's very lighthearted. You don't need to really concentrate. Yeah, it's just us two.
Yeah. And reading the description of it, it's like you're finding the funny in the shit that is life.
Basically, that's it. That is just us chatting shit for half an hour a week. Basically.
I love it. That's my favorite thing to do. That's why I'm doing this too. Like, I just love shooting the shit with people. So you did mention that you do talk about infertility and baby loss on there. So can you tell me about your individual journey? Like, when did you, meet your husband? Did you always want to have kids? I love to start with those questions.
Yeah. So my husband and I met in 2010. So we've been together 10 years now. And we very quickly moved in together. We'd only been dating a couple of months, and we moved in together, not because we sort of necessarily thought that it was like an epitome. It just made sense. He was 26, I was 28 at the time. We weren't like teenagers, and we just thought, hey, look, let's jump in with this. If it doesn't work, we didn't buy a house or anything. It was we just thought, if it doesn't work, it's not the end of the world. And we were together for a couple of years, and then at the end of 2012 we got married. And we both knew that we wanted to have children. I work with children in my everyday job. I've always worked with kids. I love children. So, I love kids. I've always known I wanted to be a mum. And we went on our honeymoon in January 2013, and we fell pregnant, not that we knew. And the way I actually found out that we were pregnant is I woke up one morning in sort of mid-January of 2013, and I'd completely flooded the bed. And I was quite panicked. I obviously called my doctor, went in to see her, and she confirmed that I'd had a very early miscarriage. I suppose it might also be called a chemical pregnancy. And I suppose I kind of sailed into 2013 thinking, oh God, we got pregnant. We stopped using protection. We got pregnant relatively quickly.
Right.
This is going to happen for us.
Yeah. Because you didn't even know you were pregnant, right? Until you had this. Wow.
Until it was sort of confirmed when I went to see my doctor.
That's kind of a mind fuck, isn't it? Like, how did that feel?
I know. I was like, oh God, okay. And I remember feeling really sad after the doctor told me, because I was like, oh God, well, I don't know how I feel about this. Like, I've never ever had a positive pregnancy test. And I didn't even in that moment. So I don't know what that feels like. But I remember thinking at the time, I felt desperately sad. I needed a little bit of time to lick my wounds and think, oh God, that's a baby that, could have been. But there was also this other side of me that was like, yes, but look how quickly it's happened. This is going to happen for you guys. Like, just get back on the saddle. Quite literally, like, keep going, just get back on with it, and everything will be fine. And that isn't the way our story went. And actually, here right now, kind of from that moment, 8 years on, we are still childless. We still don't have children. So I think about that pregnancy quite a lot, and I think, gosh, we'd have a 6 or 7 year old running around now, like we'd have a kid like in our lives. We would be parents. So anyway, so we sort of continued to try, and nothing really happened. I've always had very irregular periods. Even in my 20s, my sister and my mum both were like, oh no, I was like clockwork at your age. And I wasn't really. But I don't think until you really start tracking your periods, you get an idea of quite how irregular they are. So we continued to try. Nothing really happened. I started to track my periods, and I noticed actually I was going sometimes 40, 50, 60 days without a period.
Wow. Okay.
And then I'd come on my period, and sometimes I've bled for like 17 or 18 days. And this started to happen. And because I was more aware and I was tracking, and we were kind of actively trying for a baby, I thought, there's something not quite right here. I'm going to go to the doctor. So I first went to the doctors when I was sort of 30. So that's 8 years ago now. And she just told me, it's down to your weight. Go away and lose weight and it'll be fine. And I went back on and off for 5 years.
Wow. Still
trying for a baby, nothing happening, desperately trying to sift through kind of medical appointments.
Yeah.
Desperately knocking on the door of my doctor saying, look, I haven't had a period now. I mean, I got to one stage in that 5 years, and I went to the doctor and I said, I haven't had a period now for 90 days.
Oh my God.
There's something wrong here. And I stumbled.
I'm sorry. Did they ever give you any other
tests, or were they just like, it's your weight? Like they just attributed it to that, like no other blood panels or anything?
Yeah, so they did do kind of some hormone testing and it would all come back normal. But what they never did until I stumbled across this GP at 35 who, it was just fluke. I phoned my doctor and I said, I want to come and have another discussion about my periods. And I happened to see this doctor who has obviously worked at the surgery I go to for a really, really long time, and I'd never seen her.
Mm-hmm.
But I walked in and I actually burst into tears. And I was like, I basically said, I'm not leaving here until we get to the bottom of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Because in amongst those 5 years, we had had countless negative pregnancy tests.
Mm-hmm.
My mental health was suffering. It was like a complete minefield. I was, I sort of alluded to in the article that, continuing to try for a baby while you're still reeling from the last negative pregnancy test is horrendous.
Yeah.
And I sort of walked into this particular appointment. I burst into tears and I said, we need to do whatever we need to do to get to the bottom of what's going on. And she listened and she said, okay, I can see you've had blood tests, but you haven't had the scans that go alongside that. And here in the UK, I don't know what it's like in the States, but to get diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is what I've got, you have to go through tests, blood tests and scans to kind of marry up the two. So there's polycystic ovaries, which is cysts on the ovaries, and then there's the syndrome, which means your hormones are out of kilter and a bit imbalanced. And so I had them done side by side, and lo and behold, it was like, yes, your ovaries have got loads of cysts on them. Yes, your hormones are not correct. Yes, you meet the criteria, you've got polycystic ovarian syndrome.
So it must have felt good to finally get a diagnosis, right? Because then you're like, okay, now we can make a plan.
And I felt like I was going insane before that.
Right. But were you frustrated and like pissed that like, how come nobody ever mentioned this to me before? Like, had you ever heard of PCOS?
I'd heard of it, but I didn't really know much about it. But I remember when I went for my transvaginal scan, which is as lovely as it sounds.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
While the radiographer was doing it, she said, look, you have got lots and lots and lots of cysts on both your ovaries. She said, I'm not concerned about them. I don't think there's anything more sinister going on, but you've told me about your periods. You've got lots and lots of cysts. I'm pretty sure your hormones are going to come back not great. And lo and behold, they came back not great. Like my hormones are imbalanced. But in amongst that 5 years, I was like, I honestly felt like I was going mad. Anybody who has PCOS out there will know it plays havoc with your anxiety. It still does for me. It is a really misunderstood condition. People don't really know why it happens. And you sort of, I felt like I was going a bit mad. And I was like, God, this isn't right. 90 days without a period is not right.
Did they tell you that, since it's a syndrome, it looks different in different people?
Yes, exactly.
Not everybody has the same symptoms. Not everybody has the same results from other tests. And I'd love to talk more about the mental health bit of it for you, if you don't mind, and the anxiety.
No,
like, what did you feel like? Like, was it like you don't want to get out of bed, you're feeling depressed, or was it just anxiety? Or
it's anxiety, really. I definitely am an overthinker. I found a quote on Instagram the other week and it said, I'm all panic and no disco. And that is me. Like, I am all like,
oh my God, I love that. I've never heard that before. And
it was just like, oh God, I'm all panic and no disco. And I think, when your hormones are imbalanced and when they're off kilter, women who have a normal range of hormones find their periods stressful, feel like their emotions are all over the place. Women with PCOS are sort of living in that haze quite a lot of the time. And because it can take so long for the hormones to kick in enough to release an egg. And for, I know I've had periods where I haven't ovulated. Like that in itself is like, what? I'm bleeding. I've been using a device that's been tracking my temperature while I sleep. And it has told me I haven't ovulated. I haven't ovulated. So all of those kind of that release of hormones that women feel once ovulation has happened, and then the build up in the second phase of your cycle to your period, you sort of feel like you're living with that LH phase, the second part after you've ovulated, all the time. Because it's like my body can almost get close to pushing the egg out, and then my hormones drop again and it doesn't quite do it. So you're living in that cycle of like almost there, almost ovulating, no, hasn't happened, almost there. So all those feelings of like emotional, snappy, mood swings, anxious, all the things that you feel as a woman in a kind of normal, in inverted commas, cycle, people with PCOS are sort of living that week on week while their body tries to create enough hormones to send it around the body to tell the body, okay, you need to release an egg now, and then to start that cycle again to say, okay, shed the womb, the egg's dropped, there's no baby, here's period. So I think also that the really hard thing is if you're trying for a baby and you go 90 days without a period, you just tell yourself you're pregnant, right?
Right.
So you live in this, like, I know I've stopped my period coming through telling myself I'm pregnant, because I've done pregnancy tests and that afternoon I've got my period and I've been like, oh, thanks a lot, Mother Nature, you bitch.
Yes.
So I just think it's this like constant haze, constantly bloated, like, just, and the way that plays havoc with you trying to navigate your everyday life,
right,
and have enough sex to make a baby,
right,
and have constant negative pregnancy tests, and be told by medical practitioners this is all your fault, is because you're fat, like all of those things combined in the same space just make you feel like a bit of a failure, really. They just make you feel like you're undeserving of what everybody else has got. Of course you don't really deserve it, because it's all down to your weight. And so I just remember feeling, I think lost is probably the word that I would use in that 5 years. I felt like I didn't really know why it wasn't happening. I watched all of my friends feel like they shook hands and had a baby.
Right. And did your sister have kids?
Yeah, so I've got a brother and a sister.
Right.
My brother has got 3 children.
Yep.
So my sister's the oldest. She's got a boy and a girl. They're kind of 17 and 14. And then my brother's got 3 kids.
Okay.
And then 9, 6, and nearly 3.
Okay.
So they've got 5 between them.
So were you ever able to talk to either of them? And we should mention your brother, James, people might know in the States, has a talk show. And so were you able to talk about it with either of them? Or is it like, where were you going for support?
So for a really long time, I did the classic, no, I don't really want kids. Like, I had distinct conversations with everybody in my family where I was like, nah, I don't think I want kids. And behind closed doors, I was like bawling my eyes out. You know, I was kind of watching everybody else get what they wanted. And I don't know, I look back now and I am quite a heart on my sleeve person. And I look back now and I think, God, what was it about this that I couldn't talk about? And I think for like so many couples who have been through this, there's a certain shame that comes with it. There's a certain like, God, why is it us? Why can't we do the one thing that really humans are put on the earth to do, which is, you know, recreate humans? Right. Everybody else around us is doing it. God, lots of people are on their second. Like, you know, how I think to actually open your mouth and say, yeah, do you know what? God, we've been trying for, at that point, I don't know, 2-3 years and it hasn't happened. I just didn't feel able to talk about it. And then I suppose one day I can't even remember what the kind of trigger was to open up about it, but I just remember thinking, God, what am I doing? Why am I hiding this from people who love and care about me the most in the world? Why are those people why am I not letting them into this? And for me, and this is obviously a really personal choice, and I know lots and lots of couples who don't feel able to do it, and that's totally fine. And I think one thing I'd love to say is that, you know, that classic statement, you do you. And I think that's the thing we've got to get used to in the fertility community. Like, not everyone's going to go for treatment. Not everyone's going to want to share it with their nearest and dearest. Not everyone's going to want to talk about it. And actually that's totally fine, because this is such a personal, intimate journey, and the only 2 people that are responsible for that are you and your partner. So I got to the stage and I actually sent my family an email and just said, look, we just want to lay it on the line really honestly with you. We've been trying for a baby for a couple of years. It hasn't worked. I'm in the process of getting tests. And I think there was probably a relief for them, because they thought, oh, okay, at last, she's been putting, and I think my mum and dad and my siblings probably knew it was complete BS that I was saying I didn't want kids. Like,
right. Because they're like, we know you. We've grown up with you.
I think they were just like, this is bollocks.
Right.
I think once I talked about it, there was a understanding and a realization. And I think it's really hard, isn't it? It's hard for parents. It's hard for siblings.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to love somebody so dearly and watch them not get the thing that they desperately want.
Absolutely.
And I think it's a hard journey for family and friends to walk with you.
Yeah.
And so I think there was a relief when I kind of talked about it. And then it just sort of became, more open. We owned it a bit more. I mean, I'm really fortunate now. I don't think either of my sister's definitely not going to have any more children. She's like mid-40s. I'm pretty sure James is done.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of immediate pregnancy announcements, I'm pretty done. And I think there is something comforting in that, because I know where I'm at now with my family, don't I? I'm like, well, my sister's got 2 and my brother's got 3. I adore being an auntie. I love all 5 of my nieces and nephews. I love the bones of them. I'd walk barefoot to London and back for them. Like, I would do anything for them, and it's the closest thing I've got to children.
Right.
And I just, I love all of them so much and would do anything for them in a heartbeat.
Yeah. How has it been during the pandemic with you're probably not getting to see the ones that are in LA, right?
Yeah, it's been really hard. We FaceTime a lot, and we've got a family WhatsApp group like most people, and obviously they're too young to be part of that, but it's a nice way to check in and see how everybody's doing. And and I think I feel for my brother as well, and his wife. They're not American. They're both British. Our parents aren't particularly young. They're not really old, but so for them, it's been really hard. I think they would normally come back summer and Christmas time. They always come back twice a year.
Right.
They spend quite a long time here in the summer. They always come back for at least 10 days or 2 weeks at Christmas. They both love Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
That's really difficult, isn't it? When that stuff stops. And
yes, definitely.
And they've got a great community in Los Angeles. They've got great friends, but it's not the same as your family, is it?
Exactly.
It's not the same as your mum and dad and your siblings. And
can I ask you too, Ruth? And you don't have to go into this if you don't want to, but how was it on your marriage? Because I've been really vocal about how my husband and I, when we were going through this, we really, really hit kind of rock bottom, like a place where at one point we were like, are we going to make it? And, we've been together since we were 16. We're like high school sweethearts, but it was really hard. And I know it's hard on a lot of relationships. So I'd love to hear, if you don't mind, how that affected you and your husband, Matthew.
I think I had to really quickly learn that Matthew and I grieve and talk about things and deal with things in very different ways. Mm-hmm. We are classic male, female stereotypes. I'm an external processor. I'm like, grab all my girlfriends, pour me a glass of wine. Let's sit and chat this through.
That's how I am too. Are you is your love language words of affirmation?
Yes.
Same.
And gifts, like the very public displays of like, I love you. I think I am an externally processing extrovert. And Matthew is an internally processing introvert.
Yes. My husband's love language is acts of service. And I'm like, okay, he'd rather me unload the dishwasher than tell him that I love him,
So Matthew's is physical touch.
Okay.
But and I remember there's an amazing website. You'll definitely be able to get it in the US as well. It's called Saltwater and Honey. And it's 2 couples who have all faced infertility, and they explore the effects of childlessness and faith, actually. So, but it's not overtly Christian. They're not going to try.
I really want to check that out. Okay.
Yeah. So they write blog posts, and they're phenomenal. They're on Instagram as well. And they are just 2 beautiful couples. And I found one particular day where I was convinced I was pregnant. I had told myself I'd filled my basket on many websites with loads of stuff. I'd planned the announcement. I was like, this is it.
Yeah.
And I took a pregnancy test that morning and it was negative. And it floored me. I remember actually lying on my bathroom floor in the fetal position. When you cry and you're like, where did that sound come from? I've never created a sound like that before. I was sobbing.
Yes. Actually, that's so funny that you said that, because I had a moment like that where I was literally on the bathroom floor after miscarriage number whatever. Yeah. And I actually made myself laugh because I was like, ooh, And I was like, what the fuck?
Where do those noises come from? It's like, oh my God, I didn't realize I could create.
And I was like, I feel like I'm like being so dramatic and like I'm in a movie, and it made me crack up. Like, because I was like, this is crazy. But I know exactly what you mean. That like guttural like feeling.
God, I got back into bed. And I could, Matthew was crying too. Anyway, that day I stumbled across Salt, Water and Honey, and I found a blog post that like completely spoke to me, and I read it out loud to him, and he hardly like made a murmur, and I lost it. I was like, I was like, basically, I was just like, fuck you. Like you never engage in these conversations with me. You can't, like, I really need you to do this and this. And he was like, and he basically was like, okay, but I'm not you. And you needed all of that shit and you needed all of that stuff, but I'm not you. And it's interesting because I've had quite a few messages from mainly women on Instagram. That's my kind of main, following. And I've had quite a few messages from women saying, I don't know how to get my husband to open up. And I messaged back saying, you can't. You've got to give him permission to deal with this the way that he needs to. You've got to like back off in a way. You've got to allow him permission to go through this. And just because he's not sobbing on the floor or overtly looking stuff up or talking to you about it 24/7, it doesn't mean it's not hurting him.
Yeah.
And I sort of feel like that moment with that blog post was a catalyst for us, because I had been desperately shaking Matthew, saying, for God's sake, talk to me. And he had been pushing me away, saying, for God's sake, let me deal with this myself.
Yeah, it's such a good point.
And I think one thing that didn't come up in the article, but while we were sort of going through all this stuff, is too big a conversation for this now, but it came out that Matthew was harboring a secret drug addiction. So we're in this like mess of trying to get through infertility, and I find out that he's, secretly using drugs. Interesting time in our life. But I think that spoke volumes to me about how Matthew was trying to handle this stuff.
Yeah.
And he just needed me to say. And that day when all his like drug addiction had come out by that point, and we'd worked through it, and we were in a much better place. We'd had loads of therapy. We've had together as couples and individually, we've had loads of therapy. And I think in that moment, I was like, God, Ruth, you've got to leave him alone. You've got to let him go to his cave if he needs to. You've got to let him. And I sort of said to myself, if you need to externally process this, you need to find ways that you do that involve or don't involve him. Because I was basically putting all my shit on him and saying, you're going to deal with this the same way I am. And he was like, whoa, I don't deal with stuff like that.
Right.
Hold that thought, guys. This episode is being sponsored in part by Thrive Cosmetics, an independent, woman-founded and owned beauty brand that specializes in high-performance makeup and skincare that's both vegan and cruelty-free. Now, we all know the holidays provide the perfect excuse to get a little more glammed up than usual. And Thrive Cosmetics is a new beauty brand I've discovered and really fallen in love with. And right now, they have some amazing discounted sets that are perfect for gifting. Plus, for every product you buy, they donate to help a woman thrive. Now, talk about holiday cheer. Also, you guys know I love me a female-founded and owned company, and Thrive takes it one step further. Their mission is called Bigger Than Beauty, which means that for every purchase, they donate much-needed products and funds to nonprofit partners nationwide who are helping women face significant challenges to thrive again. All right, now let's talk about some of their high-performance products. Thrive Cosmetics products are made with skin-loving ingredients, and they're formulated without parabens, sulfates, and phthalates. And a lot of the sets right now include a free tube of Thrive Cosmetics' best-selling Liquid Lash Extensions Mascara, which is one of my faves. This is the mascara you may have heard about that is sold every 5 seconds. It's flake-free, smudge-free, and clump-free, and it's got more than 7,000 5-star reviews, and it also won Glamour's Best Clean Beauty Product of 2020 award for the best mascara. I was wearing it the other day, and my daughter Ever said, "Mom, are you wearing fake lashes?" And I wasn't. I was just wearing their Lash Extensions mascara. So here's the thing. You can start thriving and help women in need today by going to thrivecosmetics.com/infertileaf for 15% off your first purchase. That's Thrive, CAUSE medics.com/infertileaf for 15% off. Thanks so much, Thrive.
Such a good point.
I think and one thing that sort of I start saying to couples now is when they message me is, what about having a tub somewhere in your house where you can write down how you're feeling and put it in there?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think sometimes having to look somebody in the eye or sit down and have a massive chat, it just doesn't work for some people. So if you have a tub with a pad by it, you can then say to your husband or your wife or whoever it is, I've been struggling with something this week. I've chucked it in the tub. Have a read of it, will you? And when you're ready to talk about it, can we just have a chat? And I think it takes away the sting of like, God, we've got to have a big conversation about this. I've got to psych myself up. Completely. We're going to have a chat after work. We're going to sit down. It's all going to be serious. And you can write that stuff down, and then you can have nights or afternoons, or you say, look, should we just go through what's in the tub? Is there a couple of things we need to talk about? Let's pick something out, you know. But I think for me, I had to learn that Matthew needed permission to deal with this stuff the way that he needed to. And just because he isn't sobbing every 5 minutes, it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt him.
Absolutely.
But I also think your sex life is just like, you know, it becomes like just all encompassing. And I think what people don't understand that haven't kind of walked this stuff is just how it seeps into every single area of your life. Whether that's somebody at work's going on maternity leave, right the way through to my husband and I have just, you know, done a round of IVF and it's not worked. Like, I think it's, you know, it's such a misunderstood journey, really.
So just continuing with your story and the chronology of it all. Yeah. So what happened? So you found this doctor. I got this diagnosis and I was like, amazing. She referred me to, obviously we are really fortunate in the UK that we have the National Health Service, and some couples, although it's quite unequal, but some couples can get at least one round or a couple of rounds of IVF on the NHS. So we fast forwarded now, we're sort of like at the end of, I think by this point we're probably at the end of maybe 2017 or like mid 2017. In January 2018, we went for our fertility appointment with a doctor on the NHS, and we were in this consulting room. I'm 35 by this point, so I'm by no means old, and we're in this consultation room and we're having a conversation, and he's talking to me about kind of my periods and stuff. And then I said to him, look, you know, what are the chances of us kind of being able to pursue some treatment on the NHS? And he just looked blankly at me and he said, oh no, hasn't your doctor told you you're too old for NHS, for IVF in this area? And I'm like, right, okay. And then he said, oh, and by the way, you're too fat as well, probably. And I just remember, like, I was like, okay. Oh my God. And then from then we spiraled into a conversation about me having a gastric band. Oh gosh.
And I was like, oh my God, like I've come here to talk about the potential of me being a mum.
Right.
And you're talking to me about an operation that isn't your specialist area, and you've owned that.
Right.
You've then gone on to say, because I was getting quite upset at this point, and I said, so if I lost weight, because also within these 5 years, I should just say I did lose 6 stone and nothing about my periods changed at all.
Yeah.
So I said to him, so if you're telling me I have a gastric band and I lose weight, will you guarantee my PCOS will go? And he said, well, no, I can't, because you can have PCOS when you're not overweight. And I was like, right then. So we're still going to be in the same place. We're still going to be at a point where my body can't do what it needs to do. And he said, well, I would go. And then he basically said, well, my advice to you is to get a gastric band. Although once you've had the surgery, you can't try for a baby for 18 months. And there's no guarantee it will work anyway. So, and I just remember staring at him thinking, oh my God, like you're a doctor, you're a gynecologist, like you are meant, you're a fertility expert. You are meant to be comforting and kind and have these honest conversations with people. He tried to say that I definitely needed to be weighed. And I was sort of crying at this point saying to him, why do you need to weigh me? You've already told me I'm too fat. Like what is... And then the nurse actually refused to weigh me on the basis of my emotional presentation and said, I don't think it's fair.
Yes.
And we walked out of that appointment, and the only way I can describe it is the sort of ache that I had in my heart, like as we drove home. I will never forget that deep, deep feeling of loss and shame, and like just thinking, God, this is all my fault. I'm a complete failure. He didn't acknowledge Matthew really at all, apart from in the consultation when he turned to Matthew and said, well, you're not the problem because you've got brilliant swimmers.
God.
I just remember thinking, God, this is all my fault. Matthew, if he'd married somebody else, he'd be a dad by now. This is all on me. I felt totally alone. I felt like my whole existence was like there was no point. I was like, what? And that continued for the next kind of 18 months. So from January 2018 kind of through to the middle of 2019, so back last year. And I can't honestly describe how it felt. I just remember feeling the loneliest I've ever felt in my life. I just felt like I didn't fit in society. I felt like I just didn't know what life looked like anymore. I just thought, God, this is it now. What are we going to do? How are we going to cope? How are we going to get through this time? What's it going to be like if we never have a family? Like if we can't grow our family, like what is that going to feel for us? And it was kind of 18 months of, not no joy, but really struggling to find any sort of joy really. And
I know that.
Feeling really like broken, heartbroken really, just like this thing had been whipped from underneath me. I felt so left out. I felt so left behind. It was really, really bleak.
I'm so sorry, Ruth. Oh, what did you do? Like, were you able to find like support groups? Or I know you said you've gone to therapy and stuff. Like, how did you deal with that?
I don't know. I probably didn't deal with it very well, actually. I probably, looking back now, wasn't very kind to myself, or, I cried a lot. I remember like most days crying, whether that was because there'd been a pregnancy announcement or I felt like people who hadn't experienced it didn't understand. And I suppose it was in that sort of time that I found this kind of community on Instagram that was sort of starting to emerge, or it felt to me it had probably been emerging for long before that, but there was a space that said, yeah, God, you're welcome here, we get it, like we know what this is like, we know what it feels like. I did actually find a clinic in the UK that would have treated me even though I had a high BMI. I did find a clinic, and treatment for us isn't completely off the table. It's almost off the table, but it's not completely gone yet for us. And I think I honestly don't know how I got through it. I suppose I look back and I muddled my way through. I don't know how I continued to put one foot in front of the other. I don't really know how I survived it. I don't, like, it felt like the longest, bleakest winter I've ever lived through. Dark all the time, cold, those horrible winter nights where you can't catch your breath because it's so cold. That is really from that January right the way through to the summer of last year. Those 18 months felt very, very, very dark, very bleak.
So what changed in the summer? Was that when you started finding Instagram?
It's so weird. We got left some inheritance by Matthew's nan, and we bought a house. And so we were in rented accommodation for the whole of our marriage since we'd sort of started, being together. And we bought this house, and there was like, I don't know, it was ours. We owned it. It belonged to us. I felt like, for me, I'd sort of grown up, I'd come of age. It was like, oh God, I can't be in the mummy club, but I can talk about making mortgage payments now. It was like, I don't know, there was this,
well, something to nurture, something to
a security,
pour your energy into.
And it was a blank canvas, and we could decorate it the way we wanted. We could have discussions about what we were going to do with our house. We weren't paying money every month for somebody else to have a house. It was ours. And there was a really defining moment for me that was like, this is ours and it belongs to us and nobody can take it away from us. If we continue making these payments every month, this will continue to be ours. Like, we're not going to get evicted, we're not going to get kicked out, we haven't got a landlord wanting to do inspections. This belongs to us. And there was something for me, like a new season, almost like a new joy of like, oh wow, like I didn't think I'd get this yet, and I've got it. Like I've got it. And I started to, I suppose, look beyond motherhood. And look, let's be honest, when I die, there isn't going to be anybody at my funeral talking about how many kids I pushed out of my vagina. That's not going to be the thing that's coming up, right? They're going to be talking about the person I am and the way I treated people and how kind I was and what I did for my neighbor and, how I helped people out. Nobody's going to stand around going, oh God, well, she didn't have any kids, so she completely failed at life.
Oh my God, you're so right.
I started to find this new narrative that said, okay, in the midst of all of this pain and despair, Ruth, you've got a choice. You have a choice in this, and you can choose to, live a life that shuts the door behind you every night and you sob and it's dark and it's bleak. Or you can choose to say, God, where's the joy in this? How can I live differently? And it's just over a year ago, Matthew and I, so October last year, we were just in our bedroom chatting, talking things through. I was crying. I think Matthew was crying as well. And I just said to him, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't know if I can, this continued cycle of sex, negative pregnancy tests, negative pregnancy tests. I was like, I just don't know. And I suppose the buying of our house and having something else to focus on, when you buy a house, it's massive, isn't it? It's like constantly signing documents. You've got no time to think about anything else.
Right.
So I suppose that sort of magic of buying a house, there was something in me that said, God, what could life look like if I take myself out of this struggle for a bit, not for good. By that point, I was definitely like, I'm not giving up on, or I'm not letting this go for good.
Yeah.
But there was sort of a struggle of okay, Ruth, what happens if you put this down for a bit? What happens if you look at life differently? And we decided in October last year that we were going to stop trying. And that meant for us that we were going to no longer have unprotected sex. And that's really, I know for lots and lots of people in the fertility community, that's such an odd statement, because every month it's like, you have a period and it's like, oh, that's another egg gone.
Yeah.
But for me, and I can obviously only talk about my experience, for me, I had to put a stake in the ground. Yeah. And I had to say the old is gone. That dark, bleak 8-year winter that we've been through, this complete kind of up and down roller coaster that we've lived through, I had to say that's gone, that's over, that's finished, and there's a new beginning. And I don't know what life looks like. When we were having this conversation, Matthew and I, the back end of last year, I was sort of saying to him, we don't know what life looks like if we put a stake in the ground, but we've never done that before. Yeah. And we'd had moments where we had stopped trying before, but
this was more definitive.
Yeah, and we hadn't used protection. So you just sort of say, well, we're not really trying, but you're still sort of sifting through everything, looking up pregnancy symptoms, telling yourself, you're still going on that same rat race, really. Yeah. So the back end of last year, we said, okay, enough's enough. And Matthew was, I think, probably as relieved as I was to have that honest and frank conversation, because I think he was worried about me. I don't think he really knew how to raise it. I don't think he really knew how to talk about it, but he was worried about me. I know he was. So October last year, the last 12, 13 months, and probably 4 or 5 weeks ago, we started to open up the conversation again of what does this look like? What do we want? We've both got to want this. Yeah. What are your thoughts now? So I think Matthew really worries, probably rightly so, about treatment. IVF is a cruel lottery. It is cruel. Yeah. You roll the dice, you keep your fingers crossed, you hope for the best. Absolutely. It's a gamble. Yeah. And I don't know, this grief without a loss, which is exactly what this is, this whole fertility thing is a grief without a loss. It's a constant month-on-month grief when somebody hasn't physically died. And that's so hard, isn't it? Because if somebody in your life dies, you phone the people you love and you say, so-and-so's died, and they get it. You go, oh my God, I'm so sorry. If you phone your boss and say, I've got my period this morning and I'm absolutely bereft and heartbroken, they're like, okay.
But I think that the people in our community understand that it doesn't have to be a tangible loss, because it's the loss of what could have been. It's the loss of your dream, and it's the loss of what you thought was going to happen. Yeah. Yeah. So I think we all get that. It is a loss. Yeah. And it's so hard to, when there's nothing tangible,
that you've lost, for people that haven't kind of experienced this, it's so hard to explain it to them. So I think both of us are worried about if we did treatment and it didn't work. And there's lots of people that say, but what if it did? And I'm like, oh yeah, but you haven't walked the 8 years I've walked.
Right, exactly.
You know, like you don't understand the kind of battle wounds that I've got, that we've got as a couple. You don't understand. We've had, you know, late night chats about everything to do with growing our family. You've never had to do that. You got pregnant by having sex. Like, it's completely different.
Yeah.
So I think for me, if we're going to do it, we got to make a mind up quickly. I'll be 39 in May. Not really old, but you know, when I'm knocking on the door of 40.
Yeah. I hear you. I had my son at 41.
Yeah, so I know I can't leave it too long. I'm looking at, you know, I sort of think, should we just go down the route of donor eggs? I doubt my eggs are in particularly good quality anymore. So there's lots of things sort of, there's a whole spectrum for me of like maybe embryo adoption or donor eggs. And for me, it's definitely not completely off the table. But Matthew and I, from very early on in this, made a pact that we've both got to be in it, and we've both got to be both feet in it. So we've had a few conversations, and you know, I've said to him, this is down to you to process a bit more. Like, let's not think about it this year. We're living in a pandemic. Let's get the shit show that's 2020 out of the way.
Jesus.
And let's go into the new year and maybe start to have some conversations. And then the other thing for us is fostering. Adoption maybe, but there's lots of things for me that I kind of lean towards fostering probably more. And if we can't have birth children, I would love to give children who aren't picked for adoption a family. I'd love to give those kids that are a bit older or come in a sibling group or have got some more complex needs, the family that they deserve, quite frankly, and that they should have. So, yeah, I think fostering, I think the honest thing is fostering for us, whether we'd have had birth children, would have been on the table anyway. I think we both feel like it's something that everybody should think about.
Amazing.
And there's lots of people that have said that classic line that the infertile community get all the time. Why don't you just adopt?
Yeah.
And
so
I started saying back to people, well, why don't you adopt? Because it's not up to people who are infertile to
or why don't you just fuck off?
But also, like, it's not just down to me because I can't have birth children to solve the crisis of adoption. Like, everybody should consider it. Everybody should consider whether they've got the room in their family to give it to a child who needs it. So I've started saying, sure, yeah, well, I'll continue to think about adoption as long as you do as well, because whether you've got good semen or good eggs is irrelevant as to whether you should consider adoption.
That's awesome. I love that.
And that soon shuts people up. They're a bit like, oh God, I hadn't really thought, I've got birth children, so I shouldn't have to think about adoption.
Right.
So I think, you know, there are kind of options on the table for us. But, you know, the other option is we live childless. That is still something that we talk about as much as having children in our lives. That is still something that we toy around with. That's still something that we say, God, we've done a whole year childless and not trying. Wouldn't have been our choice, but we've done a whole year. We've had other than coronavirus, we've had a great year. You know, we've got through a pandemic without kids as well. We've got through all of the kind of external factors that the world has thrown at everybody this year.
Yeah.
So I think there's options on the table for us. But I think to anybody who's listening to this, you know, the grass always looks greener on the other side, but sometimes you get there and you realize it's just grass. And I think, you know, for me, I had to stop looking over the garden fence. I had to stop saying I want what they've got. I had to stop saying, and I think we've got to lose this. I did a post about this on Instagram. There's a lot of language in the infertility community that me personally, and this is just my opinion, that we have to think about. You know, I didn't give up on being a mum. I had to let it go. That language is so different. Like, giving up and letting go is really different language.
Absolutely.
And I didn't give up. But also this whole thing about, you know, I get people messaging me saying, oh, you're so brave for talking before you've had success. success is such a weird word to use around IVF. I've spoken in the midst of my childlessness. That doesn't make me less successful, doesn't make me less of a woman, doesn't make me less of a person. And actually, when we start to talk about IVF cycles as success, those couples that have had 10, 12, 3, 2, 1 cycle and it hasn't given them success, the opposite of success is failure. So when we use that language, we're saying, well, those people haven't had success. And I think we need to start to challenge that conversation. And that's partly what I do, mainly through my social media, is put different things out there. You know, what if I never get the title mummy? What does my life look like? You know, what, I didn't give it up, I had to let it go. We never got our kind of, in inverted commas, rainbow baby. Like all of those, that language that is used and has been used for years, I try and dissect it and say, hang on a second, like when you say to somebody, you're so brave for talking before you've had success, what does that do to everybody else in the community who is still, in inverted commas, unsuccessful?
Right. It's so true. A lot of it is perspective, right?
Yes, absolutely.
It's perspective. And you're so right about the language is, you know, we need to be careful that, you know, things are being put in the right terms, because you can really hurt somebody who's already heartbroken.
Yeah. So that's up to us now, present day, where, I feel like this podcast has brought, that I do with my sister, has brought so much joy.
Yes. Well, you're finding the funny. Yeah. I can't wait to really subscribe to it.
Life-giving for me. And I know, like, you know, when we first started, I've never edited anything in my life. I edited it myself. We've both plowed hours into this podcast.
Right.
My sister's got older kids. If I'd have had a 3-4-year-old running around, it would have been so hard for me to give that the energy and time that it needed.
Exactly.
So I start to think, oh, you know, maybe this is plan A. Maybe this is what my life was always supposed to look like. And would I trade it to have a kid? Yeah, probably at this point. Like, you know, if somebody said to me, oh, you could wake up tomorrow and you'd be pregnant, would I go for it? Yeah, definitely. Of course I would. I would give anything for that to be my story. But for whatever reason, at the moment, it isn't. And I think I've got two ways I can live. I can either say I'm going to find joy and I'm going to live life to the full, to the max, not being a mum, or I can choose the other route. And the other route for me, I've done for the past 8 years and it's been horrendous. So, I don't want to go down that route again.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for listening to my conversation with Ruth. I adore her, in case you couldn't tell from our conversation. But Ruth, thank you so much for talking about all that stuff. And thank you all for listening. Guys, definitely go check out her podcast, which is called Finding the Funny. And if you have a moment, you can rate and review not only her podcast, but mine as well. So that's the way that, you know, we get more listeners and we spread these stories around more. So thank you guys so much, and I will talk to you next time.